hello from Ukraine. How are you?
Good. Sorry for taking so long to arrange the talk. Sorry.
Please tell me your professional life story. How did you come to the photography? When did you take your first shot and what was it in time?
Well, basically, I sort of started photographing when I was 14, 15 years old. I found my father had an old camera in the closet that I stole and started taking pictures, and first, of course, it started just with taking pictures of friends and things like that. But then I got really somehow taken by the magic of that. And then I started to do it more and more, and I built a dark room in the family bathroom, driving everyone in the family crazy, of course. But so I started developing, and there was something about the magic of this process that really spoke to me. And then it was really what I started doing a lot in my sort of high school years. And then sort of when I was 18, finished with high school, I sort of had to say, okay, what do I do now? Do I find something else to do with my life, or do I continue doing this thing that I'm doing all the time? And I just continued with the photography. So in a way, I feel like I never made really a decision to become a photographer. It's just sort of like I've been doing it as long as I can remember. And then I went to England. I got a place in a small school for 1 year, and then I was lucky to get internship at Magnum Photos in London. And that was basically my education, I say, that year. Just making coffee in the Magnum Photos office and sort of picking up everything that was going on there. And then I got a small grant from Magnum, because that was part of this 1 year internship. You work there for almost free for 1 year, but at the end you got like a small grant, to sort of get started and do a project. And so I took that money and I moved to Siberia, to Far East Russia, and I had this big fascination with the former Soviet Union. And it came from sort of a family history. I don't know how detailed I should talk about all this, but so a short story is sort of like my mother, her parents both came from, sort of Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. I mean, it was one of these Jewish shtetl villages that kind of crossed all the borders at certain times in history, They went to America before the First World War, and sort of when I was a teenager, I'm born in 1977, so it means that when I was 12, 13 years old, it was the first time I was looking at the world with adult eyes, and at exactly that same time was the same time as the fall of the Soviet Union, right? 89, 90. And then sort of this American branch of my family had sort of assumed that all of the people in the family who stayed behind in these villages that they had all been killed in the Second World War, in the Holocaust, basically. But right in 1989, we got a letter from one guy who was sort of the head of the family, then living in Leningrad. Okay, a part of the family we didn't know anything about, and then that became like the big conversation in my family. And he had turned out he was sort of the patriarch of that family. He had spent 20 years as the captain of a nuclear submarine based in Vladivostok, and sort of like it was just like this feeling for a teenager that sort of suddenly, without me knowing it, sort of my family was involved in the sort of like the end game of the Cold War somehow, so it became like this huge fascination for me, and that's why this is the short part of the story. This is why when I finished that time in Magnum, I had this like enormous desire to go to the sort of former Soviet Union and sort of explore this part of the world. So that's where I went and made my first project, basically in Siberia. I went there for a year to try to learn Russian and try to learn photography, basically.
So, Jonas, you said a little bit about Magnum Photos, and
Yeah.
of course I know that you are a member. Tell me, please, tell me about how you started working with this legendary agency, and tell a little bit about the life in Magnum Photos.
So basically, I had this one internship, but then I had no relationship to Magnum after that. I went and I started freelancing photography around the world. Then in 2004, I was invited to submit a portfolio, etc. And I did, and to my amazing surprise, I was accepted. And it was, for me, it was the stuff of dreams, because like I said, when I started photography when I was 14, 15 years old, I discovered photography through books I found in the library in my small hometown. It was very limited, it wasn't like I had access to, I'm so old now that I grew up without the internet, but a lot of the photography that spoke to me a lot of them were Magnum photographers, Joseph Kudelka and Leonard Freed and Gilles Perez and these guys, were my teenage heroes, so to stand suddenly in the room with these guys was like just amazing, So now, okay, that was in 2004, so I've been there 15 years or something now. So now I realize, Magnum is so many different things. It's sort of like, yes, it is an agency, it's an archive, it's all these things, but it's also very much like a family. It's like you stay there, and these people are around. You watch them grow old and go through the stages of life, and it's also like a family, and there's something beautiful about that. But Magnum is it's like it's both very inspiring place. It's also very chaotic and crazy place. It's like very many things. But it's an amazing thing to be just part of all this creative energy, And I think these days there's so much creative energy in Magnum, like maybe more than ever, because I think now there's such a diversity of photography in Magnum. In the 1970s, 80s, it was quite limited, the different kinds of photography in Magnum. Now we have so many different ways of using photography to express oneself, and so many different kinds of photographers. It's very inspiring for me. It's very inspiring.
Oh, Jonas, I read somewhere that you were the president of the Magnum agency. Is it true?
Yes. This is true. In 2010 to 2011 or something like that, I was the president, which was completely crazy. And
how is it? Tell me a little bit about it, please. How is it to be a president of the legendary Magnum agency? It's very interesting.
Well, I was very young, I was, just 33 years old or something, but, it was for sure the worst year of my life.
Why?
No, because, yes, great honor and everything, but, it was, being the president of Magnum is like, they say, usually people are campaigning, making election campaign to become president of something, a country or organization or something. In Magnum, people campaign to not become president, because we are photographers. We want to be out photographer and doing something like that. It's you dealing with all the problems, you're dealing with all the complaints, you're dealing with. So of course, it's a great honor, and it's important to take that responsibility when you have to. But it was really chaotic and very bad year creatively. No, but I mean, I think what was good about it was like, okay, it was a time when a lot of the younger photographers were getting more involved in the agency, which I think was really healthy, because I think Magnum can be really intimidating also, because you have all these legendary photographers, you have these guys, who are like gods, everywhere. And when you come in as a young photographer, it can be like, you can be overwhelmed by that. And I think when I became president, it was part of a bigger movement of younger photographers becoming more involved, shaping the direction of the agency. And I think this, it's a certain amount of generational conflict, but I think it was also very important. And so the good thing about that was sort of like this, I think, rejuvenation of the younger generation and of all of Magnum. But I'm not a president material. I think I learned that. I would rather sit here and think about photography and think about new projects. And when you have 200 emails coming in a day from angry people, it's not good for photography. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I understand you. It's very hard work. And one more question about Magnum Photos. Tell me, please, what are the prospects, in your opinion, of Magnum Photos? How has Magnum Photos changed in the 21st century with the advent of the internet? Now almost everyone has a camera. It's not like at the time of Bresson and Kappa. What way has Magnum chosen now? How do you think?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, like I said before, Magnum is something very different today than before. And that is both because of outside pressures of the marketplace and the media landscape, and also because of more openness to new ideas. But I think, the status of being an agency today, like Magnum, is like, the truth is like just being alive is a success story. Because most of these agencies comparable, there used to be a lot of them, independently owned photo agencies. There are very few of them are left, because they're either bought up by the big companies or they have gone bankrupt, because it's really tough. Adjustments in the new media landscape, it's changing so much. Every media institution in the world is trying to figure out the formula, from the New York Times to the local newspaper in a small town in Ukraine. Everyone is trying to figure out how do we change and make sustainable activity, when the paper circulation is collapsing and the new internet media is there. And so Magnum, of course, has to change along these things, and it means it changes sort of the business model. It changes a little bit where we put out our work. And some can say, the advent of the whole internet age was, it used to be much better before because all the magazines were really strong and made really good assignments all the time. But, the other way to look at it is that now we are so much more free. We are not bound to these editors. We can create our own projects and distribute them in such a more effective way. So there are all these new opportunities. And I think, Magnum has in a way been quite good for an old organization like Magnum, you know, one of the oldest agencies, made in 1947, you know, Magnum has been quite good to adapt to this, and early on in digitizing and putting things out like that. And but it is a constant battle for kind of finding the formula and renewal. You know, I think there's so much interesting going on now. You know, Magnum started this square prints, these small print sales, which in a way is like taking print sales to a whole new market. You know, you don't have to be a rich collector to own a signed, you know, Martin Power print. You can buy it for $100, you know. So it's like, it's really democratizing this kind of collection of art. So I'm a big supporter of going in these directions, of experimenting with new ways to distribute. And I think it's kind of opening us as photographers up to maybe creating more interesting work, creating more free work. We are not bound to the format of the magazine, Life magazine, Aganyok kind of reportage, you know. It's like opening up. In terms of the other part of your question of like, how is it to be relevant as a, you know, documentary photographer today when everyone is taking picture with their telephones, and what is the point of being a photographer today? You know, I mean, I tell you, I ask myself that question every morning. You know, like, why we have 3 billion new pictures being made every day. There's a mountain of photographs that's growing every single day, uncontrollably, like a cancer. You know, it's kind of like, what on earth is the point of adding 20 more pictures onto that mountain? And you know, that mountain is full of good pictures, you know, like professionals or amateurs, they're all kind of good pictures. It's kind of easy to take good pictures today, you know. So like, what is the point? For me, I think everyone has their own answer to that question, because I mean, it's a question I really ask myself, like, why be a photographer today? Why do this with so much good photography around? And for me, the answer is that I don't really think about the photographs. For me, it's like, while you have millions and millions of good photographs being made every day, you don't have millions and millions of good ideas. You don't have millions and millions of good stories, you know, and millions and millions of photographs that make you ask questions. You know, that's what you don't have. And I think like the only way for me to stay interested in photography, I mean, just forget about being relevant in the market, but for me, it's like, how do I myself stay interested in photography? It's because I don't think so much about the photographs, I think about the ideas. You know, for me, I want to compete in the realm of ideas, not in photography. You know, so for me, photography is just a way to explore questions I have. It's about exploring ideas. It's about using photography. Like I usually say, sort of like, you know, I'm actually not that interested in photography. You know, I'm interested in what you can do with photography. Right. You know what I mean? The photography itself, to me, is not really that interesting. So that's how I think, and that's where I think Magnum has a role for many years to come, because what Magnum consists of, like, what is the thing that is common among all these photographers? It's photographers who, no matter what, want to go out there in their local community or out in the world and and sort of make commentary about that world using a very individual vision of photography and using photography to explore these ideas. That is what sort of like is unique about Magnum is this collection of photographers who do that, and that's why. Yeah, it makes no sense for Magnum to be there for 50 more years to put more pictures on top of the mountain that already is growing. But it makes sense for Magnum to be there, to be sort of at the vanguard of using photography to explore ideas and thoughts and questions about what's going on around us. And I think, yes, there is definitely a space for that.
Great thoughts. Thank you very much. Jonas, could you highlight a few of the most significant projects for you that you had worked on?
For me, a very significant project was my first big project, the satellites, was very significant for me because it is sort of how I learned photography. It's kind of like I learned photography through that project, and that's my first book. And sort of like it somehow made marks in me that somehow set the tone for what I do after. It was 7 years in the making, but a lot of it was trial and error, and the early parts of it was very raw and very unmeditated. It was kind of like, when I started that project in 1998, when I was just 19 years old, I had no idea I was making a book or exhibition or a famous project or anything like that. I was just following whatever I thought was interesting, and I didn't even know these different parts connected. And I think in a way for me, actually the process was like when I arrived in Siberia there in this town Birobidzhan, where I spent almost 1 year. It was kind of like it's one chapter in the satellite project, but that one chapter was kind of my first little photography project. I ended up there, and I went there alone. I had gotten sponsorship of 400 rolls of slide film to photograph there, because I basically, didn't have much money or anything. But I had this film. And I got there, and as soon as I got there, I realized that there was one thing I hadn't thought about. I had this plan to live there for 1 year and learn photography in this place and learn how to make it. I realized, oh shit, I forgot to figure out there's nowhere in 2,000 kilometers radius I can develop this film, So I was sitting there, and for 9-10 months I was living there. I was photographing every day, trying to learn photography, but not seeing a single picture. Like today, we look every 5 minutes on the screen, but then on the manual cameras with this very sensitive film, didn't see a single picture for almost a year, and that was sort of my first project, and I think that was significant because it maybe taught me that there's more to photography than just seeing the picture. It meant that I had to think about the idea a lot and the story I was telling. So I think satellite was very important. And I will say today, I just finished with a big project, The Last Testament. My latest book was also very significant for me, about the 7 men who claimed to be the Messiah. I think both projects, in a way, are along similar themes, even though they're very different. It's about exploration of truth and reality, and sort of like where fiction and reality blend together almost a little bit. So those two projects, I would say, were maybe, as I sit here today, I think about very fundamental for me.
Jonas, tell me about the cameras which you use. What was your first camera? When and why did you switch to digital cameras?
Well, I switched in 2005 when the what was it called, the Canon 5D first came out. it was in a way the first time a sort of like digital camera of good quality was in a sort of recognizable format. It wasn't too big. Now, of course, the 5D seems very big, but then it seemed like, finally a small digital camera that has good quality. So I switched sort of immediately when that came out, because for me it was like, it was a liberation, because it meant I could kind of control everything. I didn't have to use the labs. I didn't have to go argue with about the processing and something was going wrong. And it was like this, I never liked that interaction and sort of like feeling like everything has a price, I love the liberation of digital, where, it doesn't matter how many pictures you take, or you can control exactly the development yourself and all these things. So 2005, I was very happy about it. I mean, I recognized that, film, it's also very beautiful, structured. So, but for me, it was, that to be able to just do everything myself. I loved it.
But there is a trend that film photography is reborn now. What do you think about this?
Yeah, what do I think about that? Yeah, if somebody loves that, wonderful. I mean, I kind of like, great. If somebody gets a kick out of doing that, go do it. Maybe one day I'll do it myself. I have no idea. I don't think the soul of photography lies in the technique. I don't think that's where the soul is. Whether it's digital or analog, I don't give a shit. I really don't. I mean, it's kind of like, if tomorrow I wake up and want to do a project that has some analog photography, great, I'll go do it. And the next day, I don't. I think people overestimate these differences. I don't think that's where the magic is. I don't think the magic lies, the magic of photography lies elsewhere than in whether you use digital or film. I think great photography can be done in either way. So, yeah.
Thank you. Jonas, tell me please, what are you working on now? Perhaps there is some project in which you are involved. Tell me about your usual work day, please.
I'm always doing many things at the same time. I'm always doing some personal work and some assignments and even commercial work. Like, I do everything at the same time. But in terms of new projects, yes, I have a new personal project that I'm working on. That will take me some time, but all my this is of course state secrets, state secrets.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm strange like that, because I always like to, when I'm working on something, I like to keep it very close and just not get. I don't like with the Last Testament project, my previous book. I didn't release a single picture from that until everything was done in 3 years, and the book was, because I don't like the energy that comes when you put a work in progress out there, and people start commenting, and like I like to keep it very close to me.
Yes,
until I feel done. Yeah.
Okay. Jonas, and the last question, can you give some advice, please, some more important things, for your opinion, to the young photographer, to the young new fans of the photography?
The problem young people often have is not, I mean, I say young, you could be 50 years old and start photography, and I consider you young. The problem people starting out in photography often have is not figuring out how to take good pictures. I think most people can kind of figure out that. I think the big advice is figure out what you are interested in. I mean, in life, you know. Don't, like, people talk about, you know, oh, you know, I have to find my own style, or I have to find, you know, like, blah, 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 blah. Just figure out what you're interested in. What do you want to photograph? Like, what do you want to use photography to talk about or explore? You know, like, are you interested in, like, I think that is kind of like where a lot of people stop. You know, they're frustrated because they can't quite figure out what they want to do. Do I want to do this kind of photography, or that kind of photography, or this style, or that style? And forget about all the style. Just figure out what you're interested in. And if you are actually photographing something you really care about, usually the style and the pictures and all this will come by itself. If you really find something, oh, this is something I just have to photograph, I just have to use photography to explore this thing, then it usually becomes good.